There we go. Well, hello there. I'm going to pretend like every other podcast that ever gets done, like this is like as if when I hit the record button is the moment we said hi.
Yeah,
Hi.
right.
Well, welcome to the show. This is the Vitality Life podcast. It's all about basically trying to create a life of abundance and energy and just kind of making people generally healthy through mindset and through nutrition and hormones and gut health and all that sort of thing. So, hello, welcome.
Yeah, happy to be here. All those things I love.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, so again, to the traditional podcast stuff, why don't you introduce yourself, your entire life story up until this moment right now?
Yeah, right. How much time do we have? Well, in the context here of what we're going to be talking about, my name is Dala McDevit. My background was actually in nursing and healthcare. I went to the University of Texas at Austin and became a labor and delivery nurse. I was a practicing labor and delivery nurse for 5 years. And then, my own fitness journey is kind of what sparked a new passion and career for fitness and nutrition. Because, like many women, I had struggled on and off with eating disorders and restriction and cardio abuse, and just had never heard of a macro, didn't understand what a calorie was, despite being in the healthcare field, which is a whole other can of worms that we
Oh
could
boy.
probably we could
Oh.
probably get into. But yeah, and so I realized around the age of 26 that I needed some serious education if I was ever going to take control of my body and my health. And I was just really tired of being so at odds with myself and not enjoying the way that I looked or felt, or, having negative symptoms. And I was like, I really need to get to the bottom of this. And such sparked this interest in fitness and nutrition. So I started getting certifications and researching, and utilized Instagram as a sort of blog. And I was like, come follow along if you're interested in a, unexperienced cardio bunny who just got her first gym membership and is trying to figure out what a macro is. And why I made my Instagram Dayla Loves Dumbbells, because I discovered dumbbells and I was like, I'm going to try to figure out how to move these things around and what they can do for you. And yeah, everything really kind of snowballed from there. I was, really connecting with people online, having really exciting conversations. And my own journey was so transformative for me that I really wanted to help give that to others. So I took a pivot from nursing into kind of this preventative health model that we're able to do as online fitness and nutrition coaches. And now our online company has helped 5,500 clients to date, and we have almost 30 assistant coaches under us. And most recently, I'm 7.5 months pregnant. And so I'm also now learning how to help pregnant women on fitness journeys too, which is a kind of
Hey.
nice, like full circle moment back to that L&D career.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so many people. I love it so much. Yeah. This it's I'm noticing a trend. I'm noticing a lot of people moving from nursing to training. Like it's like
Yeah.
I'm noticing a lot of nurses are at some point putting together that the information and the education on how to just take care of yourself. Because I mean, more and more people are getting hospitalized by the day due to perfectly preventable health reasons. And it's like a lot of Western, like this isn't I don't want to turn this into a shit on Western medicine podcast,
Sure.
but like they go through maybe one semester of on nutrition, and now people are realizing that nutrition can solve a lot of people's problems. And I'm noticing a ton of nurses going from, oh, there's a really big gap. Like, yeah, nurses are really overworked, tremendously overworked, and it's like the reason isn't just due to just some random stuff. It's due to perfectly preventable stuff. And so I'm noticing a lot of nurses kind of putting that together and being like, you know what? How about we stop people from being hospitalized in the first place and then making that step? I'm noticing so many nurses are making that step.
Yeah, it's very common. You're spot on. I had one nutrition class in college, so it actually was part of my curriculum,
Oh,
but
hell yeah.
one class, like one credit. And I think the most up-to-date statistic is like a nutrition course is only taught in 20 or 25% of pre-med. pathways for doctors. I think that's not well known or understood by the public, that healthcare professionals, we are not getting a lot of education in like lifestyle modification behaviors, exercise, and nutrition, because there is just so much to cover on like the diagnostics and treatments and medicines and pharmacology, that a lot of the curriculum is focused there. And so I think that people think that, doctors and nurses automatically know a lot about nutrition and can teach it to their patients, but that is not the case. And that's why so many people, to the point that you just made, they're realizing like, man, it's great that I'm like, giving this medication right now, or like starting this insulin drip right now, and it's going to solve the acute problem that we have going on right here today in the hospital. However, there's so many other things that this person could be doing at home to prevent having to come back here. And then we get curious about that, and then we get informed, and then voila, a lot of nurses are entering the coaching space, because you're right, that's a really common transition that I'm seeing so many nurses make right now.
Yeah, that's like I've because through the NCI coaching space, I'm connected with a ton of other NCI coaches, and I've had a few of them on the podcast. And of like the 8 people I've interviewed on the podcast so far, 5 of them have been ex nurses. And I'm just
Yeah.
this is insane. It's awesome, but I'm like, that is an insane number of people that are just kind of doing that. But it's nice though, because
Yeah.
obviously you have this background in the actual medical field, but you also have this background in connecting with people and learning
Sure.
what's driving them, what's hurting, not just from a physical
Yeah.
standpoint, but overall. What kind of trends have you noticed carry over the most from your medical experience to coaching?
What do you mean by trends exactly?
Like what like we mentioned earlier, where like we're noticing problems in patients. What have you kind of been doing that's been helping those kind of issues that you were seeing so much
Oh,
in
yeah, yeah,
nursing?
yeah. So
Yeah, yeah.
a lot of it is the kind of stuff that you mentioned. Nutrition, number one, like people just don't really understand, because none of us are taught how to figure out our body's caloric needs, or like, what foods are sources of protein, carbs, and fats. Like, how do these foods influence our bodies? Which foods are really good for us and have fiber in them and lots of micronutrients, versus what foods might be kind of inflammatory and make us like puff up and give us bloating and like, not be the best for us. What are foods doing to our blood sugars? And, what is insulin sensitivity? And how does our diet impact that? And what are best practices? And, lots of people are under consuming protein in general, which doesn't help their exercise performance. And low protein consumption can then make them over consume carbs and fats. Why are our hyper palatable foods so delicious? And, why are we over consuming those? And how can we be cognizant of that to have those be more of a, special treat than maybe a daily regularity? Or what even is an ultra processed food? We don't know these things. We're not taught this in high school. We're not taught this in college. And so giving people that information, as well as how to exercise, and not just, joining a class, because a lot of people can figure out how to follow a program or take a class, or, go to a CrossFit box or sign up for Orange Theory. Like, typically the exercise side isn't where people see like the biggest barrier to entry. But even understanding like how to fuel for exercise and the benefits of various forms of exercise, to choose forms of exercise that not only help us achieve the physiques that we're going for, but also longevity, kind of highest bang for your buck in terms of those long-term health outcomes. And then obviously all the adjunct like walking habits, like the information that I now know about walking
Right?
and how important it is, and all of the studies that are coming out on quality of life and chronic illness prevention and longevity from just walking. I never thought walking mattered. I was fortunate that as a nurse, I was always getting my steps. That was just a lucky byproduct of the career path that I chose. But I did not understand how much water we needed, how many steps we needed. And yeah, and so that's the gap that we need to bridge and start teaching people, like, these are small, actionable, and they can be really easy things to learn in your own life. And then you can prevent yourself in for a number of different chronic illnesses from ever getting to the point of walking through those hospital doors or getting that prescription.
Mhm. Absolutely. Ah, I love everything you're saying. Oh man, yeah. I put together probably like 5 or 6 years ago the walking thing, because I started like when I started listening to somebody named Stan Efferding. I'm not sure if you're familiar too much with him.
Mm-mm.
He's called the White Rhino, powerlifter, bodybuilder, very smart, well spoken person. And he started talking about how one of the best things you can do for insulin sensitivity, which you touched on earlier, is just taking a 10-minute walk after a meal. Because
Mhm.
now you're instantly, and one, it helps with digestion, one, it helps
Yep,
with gassing and bloating, but it also helps improve insulin sensitivity, because now you're
absolutely.
creating a demand for the energy you're pulling in just by going for a walk. And I'm like, and then he showed some studies that just walking 10 minutes after a meal is more powerful than metformin for some individuals for insulin sensitivity. I'm like, how
Yeah,
is this not
it's
common
mind blowing.
information? Yeah.
And it's actually a common myth that after eating, you should lay down. Like, a lot of people believe it's kind of like whenever we were told if you eat, you shouldn't go in a pool and like something, you're gonna die if you
Yeah.
swim after you have a hot dog at the side of the pool. But a lot of people, like myself included, I remember hearing that you should always be like, sitting down when you eat, and then you should ideally lay down, or at least make sure that you continue sitting down and that you're very, very stationary, because the parasympathetic nervous system needs to rest and digest. And then you go to the research and realize that the best thing possible for you, when you have the time to do this, not always possible, but the best thing to do is to get up and do at least a 5 to 10 minute walk. You're like, that's completely contradictory to like how I've been living my life for decades.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, it is all over the place. Cool. So I want to kind of just like switch gears here, because you're very pregnant. So I kind of wanted to talk about this one for a personal reason, because
Yeah.
my fiance and I are getting married next month, and then we're intending on having a baby. So some of these questions are going to be very. Oh,
Congratulations.
thank you.
Yeah.
She wish she could have joined this because she's also becoming a coach, but she still
Cool.
works part time at a normal job, and so I just keep making fun of her that she works at a normal job. But so obviously some of them are going to be personal, but also like 99% of my audience are either moms or will be, or like in that kind of phase. So I just kind of wanted to ask you kind of like what your experience has been like, and what's maybe some misconceptions are around being pregnant and then also still pursuing your health.
Yeah, man, myths for days, very similar to the, preceding conversation that we just had here. I think a lot of people, myself included, before I understood these things, think that like when you become pregnant, it is time to stop exercising, period. That you're going to be kind of incapable of doing anything, that you should be on the couch eating for two, just eating like as much as you possibly can with your feet up. And like, yes, we should all get a little spoiled and get, those foot rubs from our partners or massages. And yes, we do need some more calories during various points in our pregnancies. But I feel like the general, like, you are super fragile, you should quit your gym membership, you should stop moving and just start eating, I realize now is completely wrong and completely inaccurate, and not the way that we should be approaching pregnancy at all. Even the American College of Obstetrics actually encourages minimum 150 minutes of exercise per week, and even forms of heavy resistance training and weightlifting are supported, and even some high intensity, not like hit like interval training, but high intensity aerobic exercise is also super supported. And we now understand that exercising regularly actually makes pregnancy easier and better. And women who regularly participate in exercise report fewer pregnancy complications, more like healthy range pregnancy weight gain, less lower back pain, less sleep problems, less hip pain, and can even have shorter labors and faster recoveries during the postpartum period. So it's so funny that the original thought process is like, stop doing anything because you're too fragile. And we now know that if you stop doing everything, your pregnancy is actually going to be more arduous, which may have been the reason that we thought pregnancy was so crippling in the first place. Because we were telling women to just put their feet up and start sitting on their butts all day. And in actuality, if we can encourage them to keep moving, they can have a totally different experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember like 10 years ago when I was doing CrossFit, there was a woman who squatted like 275 and then gave birth 6 hours later. And then
Yeah,
was
I
back
believe
in the
it.
gym, and it was back in the gym like three days later because she was recovering so quickly. Obviously, she wasn't going like crazy balls to wall intensity like CrossFit normally does, but she showed up and would just do like mobility work. But the fact that she was just up and moving around and still like, you would look at her and be like, you don't look like someone who gave birth 3 days ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's all over the place. It's baffling to me how much said everyone seems to understand that being sedentary bad, but
Yeah.
all the myths and all the prevailing information is always saying be sedentary.
Yeah. Exactly. When it comes to pregnancy, be sedentary. And it also causes a lot of swelling for people because, like, they have, pregnant ladies are kind of famous for having like swollen hands and feet and stuff. And a lot of that can be poor circulation from being super sedentary and not moving around a lot. And yeah, so a lot of that old age advice is, why some women like struggle with more aches and pains and just discomfort than they need to in pregnancy, because they could actually ameliorate those things for themselves through exercise and, appropriate nutrition, and not just kind of moving to the couch for 9 months.
Yeah. So if we were to like break it down, what is, because obviously it's different for every single person, so we have to be
Sure.
general. But what are some things that you think would be beneficial to like early on the pregnancy versus middle, and you're kind of entering that late stage? Like what kind of
Yeah.
what has your personal experience been in terms of things you've had to consider and things you've had to change?
Yeah. So, like, key lifestyle behaviors that I'd consider by trimester. And like, one thing that I always love to say here is everybody and anybody listening should always check with their OBGYN or midwife before participating in like any types of exercise routines, because you want to make sure that you don't have any particular pregnancy diagnoses that could, change your lifestyle behaviors or create contraindications to certain forms of exercise. But let's pretend that it's an uncomplicated pregnancy. You have full clearance from your provider to participate in exercise. So, first trimester, famous for lots of symptoms, right? Everyone's nauseous, nobody can eat, everyone's pretty low energy. That is okay. It's short, it's temporary. You're probably going to be like, wow, she's talking about exercising and moving, and like my head is in the toilet. And if that's you, that is totally okay. It is temporary. There is nothing that you can do about that. I have been there. I have had that crippling nausea. And if anybody told me to go deadlift, I would have sucker punched them in the face. So, first trimester,
Fair.
listen to your body. There's a lot going on. It's a big adjustment. Do not be too hard on yourself. I think the first trimester can be one of the best trimesters to give yourself grace. If you don't have the energy to participate in regular exercise, which is common, go for walks. Typically, you can always still go for walks, and you have the energy to do that most days. And then even if you can exercise 1 to 2 days per week of intentional exercise, you're doing a spectacular and fabulous job. And then eat what sounds good when it sounds good. A really common FAQ that I get is like, asparagus sounds terrible. All I want is crackers. Like, am I doing terrible things for my baby if I can't eat, high fiber fruits and vegetables? No, eat what sounds good. Eat what hopefully does not come back up. Again, you have to listen to your body here. We're going to hit those veggies hard in the second and third trimester. So don't worry if your diet isn't perfect then either. Second trimester, usually the cloud is lifted. You wake up one day and you're like, I am me again. Your body kind of regulates with the hormones. A lot of the nausea for most women will go away by week 14, 15, 16. This is where we can really implement more aggressive, healthy behaviors. So we're probably going to be able to exercise regularly. We're probably going to be able to hit our steps regularly. And we're probably going to be able to introduce a lot of foods that we perhaps had aversions to in the first trimester. So let's try to eat the rainbow again. Let's try to get different kinds of protein sources. Let's try to go back to diversity in the food choices. Let's try to get that fiber back up. Let's try to eat fruits and vegetables every day at every meal, because this is going to be the phase. Most people call this like the fun phase in the second trimester. Your belly's also typically not that big that you're having a lot of mobility issues. So it's kind of your power phase to really be able to take charge of your health. I'd also throw in here that we need to start paying attention to pelvic floor health and really core bracing and connection breathing. And this is, as our abdomen grows and increases the strain on our pelvic floor, this is also what I would start considering adding some of those exercises in. So we're doing things like connection breathing before our lifts. We're practicing bracing and hugging our babies. And we're doing mobility exercises. So like deep squat holds and lots of good stretches, because your body is, changing and growing every day. So that becomes more important in second trimester. And then finally, this is a long-winded answer, third trimester, I'm about 32 weeks myself, so I can't speak for the entire experience of the third trimester, but I'm about a month into my third trimester. In the beginning, you'll still have the ability to like eat a lot of the same foods. Like you typically don't have too many food aversions. So you can still kind of eat that diverse diet that I talked about. Heartburn usually creeps up in this trimester because that belly is just pushing on your stomach, that your meals might need to become smaller and more frequent. And you probably have a bottle of Tums in your purse. So we'll keep that on deck, but you can still usually eat the same foods, just in different volumes and quantities and more numerous times during the day to make sure that you're hitting all of your nutrition. You need like 430 extra calories per day by the time you're in the third trimester. So we definitely want to be accounting for that. Still doing all of the walking, still doing all of the exercising, but this is where we'll introduce usually birth preparation exercises. So lots of like Swiss ball work, pelvic tilts, deep squats, assisted deep squat holds, mobility exercises. And typically our exercise volume and intensity will progressively decrease as we approach 40 weeks, such that maybe we're only working out 2 to 4 times per week, maybe shorter workouts to 30, 40 minutes by the end, because fatigue will set in. And it's common for women to get a lot more tired once they get to month 7, 8, and 9. But very long answer. Those would be a lot of like the key lifestyle behaviors that I would consider based on trimesters.
Yeah, the longer, the deeper the answer, the more and more excited I get. So it's like I'm super happy about this. Yeah, I'm really happy you mentioned the pelvic floor thing, because that is actually huge. Because I've had like relatively new moms, like 6 months, and they're like, I just can't stop peeing myself, and I'm like, here's what you got: pelvic floor muscles. Let's do something about it. Because and a lot
I
of people
didn't
think
even
it's
know that my
yeah.
pelvic floor existed until last year when I got pregnant. Everybody knows how to flex their bicep, right? Like we all, like if you've exercised, you have a lot of mind muscle connection. If you haven't been pregnant, it's very rare for somebody to be able to contract and relax their pelvic floor. They're like, can you show me a picture of where this thing is that you're describing? What is my pelvic floor? So I agree with you. It's very important to learn to utilize this muscle in pregnancy.
Yes. If you're Since we're on the topic of pelvic floor, what are some ways that some either like women going through pregnancy or post giving birth, what kind of tips would you have for strengthening the pelvic floor? Because I know a lot of people a lot of women just think that now peeing yourself randomly is a normal thing. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's common, but it
Mhm.
shouldn't be as common as it is. Just again, that kind of lack of education thing. So what kind of tips would you have for women kind of going through that and experiencing that?
Yeah, I love what you said. Like, just because something is common doesn't mean that it's normal, or that, it shouldn't be the case that all women that have babies just have to endure urinating themselves when they cough or laugh or lift forever. So, yeah, things that we can be doing. Get educated on what your pelvic floor is. Really preliminary, you can Google a picture of this. Like, just start with free resources on Google. Let's visualize the pelvic floor. Basically, it's kind of a, it's muscles that sits like a hammock underneath, like at the very bottom of your pelvis, and it actually moves rhythmically with your diaphragm. So when you take a big breath in and your diaphragm expands and presses down, your pelvic floor also should relax and go down. And then when you exhale, your diaphragm comes back up, squeezes the lungs, and that's what gets the air out. Your pelvic floor does the exact same thing, and it contracts in that moment. So practicing connection breathing, these are things that, one, you could find on my page, or you could just YouTube videos of these, and figuring out how to take a minute to acknowledge that muscle moving while you're breathing, and think, relax that pelvic floor when I take a big breath in, and then contract that pelvic floor when I breathe out. Contracting the pelvic floor is like a Kegel. This is probably what most women are familiar with, and where their brain can have the aha moment because they've all heard of Kegels and most women have practiced Kegels. So we do Kegels to contract when we exhale and strengthen the pelvic floor. And then we want to basically do the opposite of a Kegel to relax it. It's really important to get that relaxation element piece as well. This is kind of a funny cue, but it works for a lot of women. My pelvic floor therapist would say, like, try to pretend like you have a tampon in and you're trying to just like relax so deeply and inhale so deeply that you just gently push that tampon out. And
Yeah.
that can actually be a really helpful cue for relaxing your pelvic floor, because your pelvic floor actually stays in a very contracted, tight position almost all day long, especially when you're pregnant and you're standing, because your pelvic floor can feel the weight of your abdomen. And so it is so tight and it's holding on really tight to support the weight of your abdomen, that you don't want to exclusively just Kegel, Kegel, Kegel your entire pregnancy. If you make those tissues too tight, it can actually be difficult for your baby to descend into the pelvis. It can be difficult for you to push the baby out, like, easily or as quickly. And if that muscle is really, really tight, and then we have the birth trauma of a baby going through it, that can prolong the postpartum recovery and actually make the pelvic floor weak afterwards. So one of my biggest recommendations would be, don't forget the relaxation piece of it. And any woman can also see a pelvic floor therapist during their pregnancy. Typically, they won't see you until around 24 weeks gestation. But I recommend, like, if you can afford it and swing it, just make one appointment and get, recommendations for pelvic floor health and exercises. They can actually palpate your pelvic floor muscles and tell you when you're contracting and when you're relaxing, to help your brain cue and make that mind muscle connection. And then you can go home and continue to practice it yourself and get really, really good at it.
Yeah, that was an awesome cue with like the whole trying to like relax so much that the tampon just falls out.
Yeah.
I have you ever are you familiar with the oxygen advantage?
No, tell me.
It's by Dr. Patrick McEwen. I want to say Scotland. It's Scotland or Ireland. I always get them mixed up, and I'm sorry if anyone is from there because they hate it when I do that. But he essentially is just all about the breath, and he wrote a book called The Oxygen Advantage and the Breathing Cure, and he uh the fact that the breath has such a direct connection to your central nervous system. I'm
Mhm.
huge on breathing. And if you look at even like the elite of the elite athletes, when they're done a game or they're done a training session, they'll lay on their back with their feet up on a bed, a box or bench or whatever, and they'll just focus on breathing to bring the nervous system back down. So
Yeah.
I really liked when with the that cue because now it's always funny when me being a male talk to female clients about stuff like this. Some of them are just like, you get it. I'm like, kind of to this from other people. It's like I like the idea because I do a lot of box breathing, a lot of central nervous system kind of relaxation stuff. So when I'm talking, so now I'm kind of I'm really happy we had this conversation just for that alone
Yeah.
because now again postpartum. Sometimes I say postmortem, and I'm like, wait, that's not the right one.
Oh no.
And I'm just like, cool. So like, how we can address this now is just focus on a full total body relaxation because
Yeah.
we live in such a high stress, high tension environment that we're always tight and wound up all the time.
Yes.
It's just for everyone, it's good to understand to relax like that. But for women that are postpartum, I think that's a huge one.
Yeah, totally. And like one final tip that I'd say there is if you're trying to figure out how to relax those muscles for the first time, try laying down. When we stand, our pelvic floor naturally contracts. It is going to be a little bit more resistant, again, because of gravity. So laying down supine can actually be one of the best positions to attempt this. And then sitting would be the next best way to do it because you're supported by the chair, so the pelvic floor can relax a little bit more. And some women really like to be able to feel the connection between like their booty and the chair because it helps them feel that muscle doing a little bit more work. The most challenging position to practice it in would be standing. So I would do lying, sitting, and then standing.
Yeah, just going from basics, like the most relaxed humanly possible to then slowly building up to less
Exactly.
being relaxed because a lot of people don't understand that even when you're just standing your muscles are contracting
Yes.
your feet, your ankles, your calves, your quads, your hamstrings,
Quads.
glutes,
Yeah.
all of it is contracting to keep you
Your
upright. If
core.
yeah
Yeah.
and it's funny because like your diaphragm and your pelvic floor, they work in such opposition of each other. And it's as we breathe, yeah, and that's usually why when I'm talking about the diaphragm being the center of all movement,
Mhm.
your pelvic floor is always in conjoined with that because
Yeah.
everything has to start with your breath. If your breath and your diaphragm are not locked in, then you cannot brace your core properly. And even if we're going into regular exercise, things like a heavy squat, a lot of the people bottom out and can't do it because their breath just isn't locked in, which then also makes their pelvic floor not locked in. If your pelvic floor is not locked in and your diaphragm's not locked in, everything else that expands outwards from that cannot be optimized, if that's the word that we can use. So it's like it's really important to understand how to connect to that because like I said, my fiance is becoming a coach. She went through GGS with Molly
Me
Galbraith.
too.
Oh hell yeah. So
Yeah.
she's learning a lot more about that, and she's like, and this is she came to me and she's like, I knew what a pelvic floor was, but I had never felt it before.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
suddenly she lightened all of her weights in the gym intentionally, and she would
Mhm.
focus on contracting that, and suddenly instantly she started getting more stable in her squats.
Yep.
Lunges used to destroy her, now they're fine. It's like just
Yeah,
activating her
that's
pelvic floor
amazing.
unlocked the mobility in her hips and her ankles and knees. It just allowed that, and I was like,
Yeah.
and that was another part where I was like, I am going to deep dive more into this because this is huge. But and then yeah.
Yeah. Dude, I absolutely love that for her. What's crazy is last year between March and December, I was also nursing a tailbone injury. And I just
Oh,
felt all this weird tailbone pulling and tightening. And I was seeing rehab specialists and physical therapists and physiotherapists. And everyone was kind of trying to work on my hips and my adductors and my quads and my, just all of those different kinds of muscles. And it just wasn't getting better and just really nagging pain with squats and lunges. And then in pregnancy, I decided to see a pelvic floor therapist, and she actually diagnosed me with like a ridiculously tight pelvic floor, which I had no idea. She was like, you're just always in a strained, contracted position. So I started going to like biweekly pelvic floor therapy. And within a month, my tailbone issue was cured. And we figured out that my tailbone was being pulled by this super tight pelvic floor that could never relax. And now I've had no tailbone pain for the last like 4 or 5 months. And it's wild to me because it never crossed my mind in a million years that I could have injuries due to a pelvic floor issue. And I was an online trainer and an online coach. And it was just fortunate that pregnancy taught me that like that muscle can play that big of a role, that it can even affect people and affect their exercise if they're not pregnant.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. It's funny because the more and more educated I get on every single topic I ever decide to deep dive into, I'm always like, how is this not more commonly known? It
Yeah.
is insane to me, especially because like I was talking to another coach last week named Stephanie Fusnick, who's like a menopause specialist.
Cool.
And we were just having this discussion that she was like, she tried she tried to get like a PhD in women's hormones in like menopausal care, which is awesome. And she was rejected by the board because they said researching and studying women's hormones is too complicated. Do something else. And I was like, and in my head, I'm like,
You're like,
women,
that's the problem.
yes, that's exactly why you should do this. And I was like, especially for women, this is why all the studies are always done on men, because women's hormones fluctuate so much that it can't be predicted. And if it can't be predicted, then they can't do proper
Yeah.
research on it. I'm like, you're only thinking in the confines of predictability. But even if you take these studies, even the ones in men, and apply all of these things to them and they get XYZ results, it's still within the confines of a metabolic ward. Therefore, it is not always applicable. So like science says this, but real life says no. And it's like, so
Yeah.
if women's hormones are so all over the place, why are we gatekeeping learning more about it? And it is insane to me how absolutely ass backwards thinking at the top is.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. Surprise, it's not very often that I get in a conversation with a man who's saying all these things for me, but it's
Oh man.
refreshing.
Yeah, I was like, I learned a long time ago that I'm a much more bubbly and like all over the place. I was in theater for 11 years, so I just like
I
have
can
that
see
sort of
that.
bouncy personality.
Yeah.
And I just connected with women more.
Yeah.
And every time, like, I'm 99% of my clients have always been female, and I was like,
Yeah.
every time that something would come up for just whatever reason, I was always like, I need to know about this. Like, if most of my clients are going to be women, I need to know more about that. And I started doing more research, and I was like, why is there not more information on this? Oh God damn it. And then I would have to like go into this big rabbit hole. And then I would do kind of like today, where I would reach out to other coaches who are tremendously more experienced in the topic than I am, and be like, hey, one of my favorite things in the world is coaching. My other favorite thing is learning. How
Yeah.
about I learn?
Yeah.
And so I was like,
Well,
cool.
that's awesome that you're doing that because it's a great service to your clientele. Because yeah, if anybody thinks that coaching men and women is the same, it is not. And the
No.
protocols should not be the same, and the training should not be the same. The like the month to month approaches should not be the same. So, you know, and
Yeah.
it's not that, coaching women is so much harder. It's just different.
Yeah.
We're just different, and you just have to approach it differently.
Yeah, and it's just understanding what those nuances are between men and women. Like the, it's easy that I can just go in and do things for myself, but then it's like Caitlin, my fiance, is all over the place, and we always have to have these conversations because we always treat our clients better than we treat ourselves. I find.
Mhm. Often, yes.
Yes. Hence why I got two hernias, and then that was fun. But those are dealt with. But
Good.
no, I got egotistical, and I was like, I'm gonna try squatting 500 pounds, and I did it, and that when I wasn't ready for it.
I
And
herniated some discs in my back from deadlifting, so I relate to you there, being a little egotistical.
yeah, we're always like, because this is the trap I fell into, was I'm a trainer and a coach. I'm a professional. I can do it better, even though the way I train my clients is obviously the right way. But
Yeah.
somehow there's that disconnect where I'm like, no, I can do this better. And then
Yeah.
it always ends up that way. But yeah.
It's common. It's
Yeah.
common. I think a lot of us think that maybe we're like invincible or we have to be more impressive in the beginning just because we're coaches. And then maybe unfortunately you injure yourself and then you learn and then
Yeah.
like I need to be just like a client.
Yeah. And
All the same warm up and stretching and consideration and practice and rest. Yeah.
yeah. Cool. Well, what are you working on right now? What are interesting things that are coming up? What do you learn and what do you work
Oh
towards?
man. Well, so we just, in the vein of pregnancy, we just launched brand new perinatal programs and postpartum programs, which is super exciting. And we launched a pregnancy app and postpartum workout app
Oh
so
hell
that like even like our non-clients could benefit from this. Because as I, like Caitlin probably realized going through Girls Gone Strong, I was like, perinatal women should not be doing the same workouts as everybody else, and they need their own like special programs and considerations and educational resources. So we just got that project off the books. And then I don't know if you know this, but my pregnancy is actually an IVF pregnancy. So kind of as an adjunct to that, we launched coaching for like the women struggling from infertility and those going through IVF and special workouts and resources. So this has been my year of perinatal and fertility and women's health. And I'm actually going to do the Girls Gone Strong menopause specialist next that
Kate and I are
launches
going to
in
go through that
June.
together.
Yeah, yeah. I'm super excited to do that one. My due date's July 23rd and the menopause cert launches June 6th. So I'm like, can I do this in like 6 weeks? And I'm gonna try to do that. But it has been like quite the year for me of trying to go the extra mile, like you said, and always learn more, especially for the female population. So that's kind of what I've been the most passionate about recently.
Yeah, we're both very excited to go through that one. However,
Yeah.
we it was funny because Caitlin made the decision to become a coach like not even 2 months ago, and then
Oh,
she was
cool.
like, Chris, what do you recommend? And I was like, GGS. And she was like, perfect. Did that. And because we live on a small little island on west coast Canada, um, the because we're on an island, the books don't really get to us very quickly. So
Oh, yeah.
she was done the course before the textbook arrived, and then she went and hopped on NCI, so now she
Oh,
can be a nutrition. Yeah.
man.
And then we're both going through the hormonal specialist course through NCI, which is fantastic. It covers estrogen, testosterone, cortisol, thyroid, and insulin, and it deep dives into
Love.
those. And then beyond that, they also have like 5 hour long masterclass courses on each one individually. So that'll
Oh,
be
very
really
cool.
cool. But then once we're done that, we're both gonna hop on the menopause specialist course so that we
Nice.
can better serve our clients because like
Yeah.
most of my clients are women. At some point, they're gonna go through menopause.
Yeah.
They're gonna need to know this. So
Oh yeah, I started like I said I started my Instagram when I was like 26. I started my coaching career when I was 27, 28, and I'm going to be 33 this year, and already in that span of time so many of my clients are perimenopausal and menopausal. And you just realize that like it can't be the case that we're like, "Oh, well we can coach women, but only until they're like 45." And like then
yeah,
then we're not the expert and like then we don't have as many answers. I'm like, that's pretty uninclusive.
yeah,
So I agree. I'm like, no, I want to be able to, help women through all of these phases of life because menopause is a hard one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Never experienced it myself, but can empathize. And, have a lot of clients and my mom tell me about the experience and they deserve better support during this
Yeah,
time than,
absolutely.
I don't know, just work as hard as my 25-year-old clients and your body should work the same, right? Like it's not the right approach.
No, no. Do you listen to a lot of podcasts yourself?
I go through phases. Yes and no.
Ah,
My husband has a podcast too, and sometimes I feel like I'm like surrounded by podcasts, and so sometimes I we'll get out of the habit of listening to them. And I really like to physically read more, but
Yeah.
why do you have a good podcast recommendation?
I was going to say specifically, Stephanie Fusnik, who I mentioned earlier, on menopause. She has a podcast called Metabolism and
Oh,
Menopause.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
so I was just going to say, hey, maybe check that one out because she's incredible, and it's hilarious because she's also like a 5'2", 125-pound little tiny tattooed lady who just keeps going, eat your fucking carbs. And it's really funny to watch because she like is such a carbohydrate fiend, and it is
Love
hilarious.
that. Love that.
Hilarious. And she's also like, I eat like 2,500 calories and I'm maintaining. Get your fucking calories up. It's really funny to watch her just go off. But yeah.
Anyone who's telling women to eat carbs, I can get behind. So she sounds great.
Oh yeah, it's funny that when people say carbohydrates are not essential, because I'm like, they're not essential for life, but I
Yeah,
would
not
say they're
essential for
essential
what?
for health and sanity.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I
And
mean,
fertility and
yes,
healthy hormone
absolutely.
production, particularly thyroid, which is the one that most women care about the most because it's our metabolic driver. And yet we starve it with low carb diets. And then we're like, why
Yeah.
are we hypothyroidism? This is rude.
Yeah, it's like women are already, especially when women go through menopause, they're already at an 80% higher risk than they were pre-menopause
Mhm.
to develop hypothyroidism. But then because they start gaining weight, because they no longer have the estrogen and progesterone buffer to kind of buffer cortisol, you're gaining weight, you're gaining that lower belly pooch, and they go, oh, well, I'm going to go on a diet. And they're like, oh, what's popular right now? Keto, no carb, fantastic. Jump on keto, develop hypothyroidism, gain more weight, get frustrated, quit, gain more weight, and they have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh no, oh no. It's also like
Yeah.
carbohydrates are such a like carbohydrates, insulin specifically, brings the hammer down on cortisol.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just it's one of those things where people just don't understand it, especially in women, because
Yeah.
first off, when you're stressed, why do we stress eat? What do we reach for? We don't reach for broccoli. We don't reach for steak. We reach for carbohydrates
Yes.
because your body knows
Yeah.
carbs spike insulin. Insulin drops cortisol. Life is good. But people are
Sugar
so,
cravings too.
yeah. Yes.
Often caused by stress or carb restriction or calorie restriction. Your body's not just doing weird things to try to make you eat cake. It's seeking glucose. It's
Yeah.
seeking carbohydrates and calories.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's, and again, one of the very few things that I've learned recently as well is that during the menstrual cycle, your estrogen and progesterone swap halfway through, right?
Yes.
The body needs carbohydrates to properly produce progesterone. So when you get those cravings on the second half of your cycle, you go, oh, I don't want to give into my cravings because that's bad. And then they wonder why they binge.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I know we could go on and on and on. I also think that sometimes, because diabetes is really prevalent and obviously a big issue, people think like, oh, well, diabetics count their carbs and diabetics lower their carbs. So if I'm a, person that does not have metabolic syndrome or insulin sensitivity issues or diabetes, I'm going to do the same thing because like the way that it works for a diabetic must be what will augment my health as well. And that's like, no, not the case. It's kind of like people too that are like, oh, well, my uncle is 60 and became hypertensive and his doctor told him to limit salt. So I'm going to be 30 and exercise regularly, and I'm going to start eating under 2,000 milligrams of sodium per day. And we need to stop trying to necessarily emulate behaviors that we see in people with like certain medical diagnoses in healthy individuals because it can actually do more damage to our health.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we humans love extremes. They see the extreme of
Yeah.
one thing and they go, that's what I want, that's what I need. I'm going to do that right now. And it's like, it's just not appropriate. It's the same
Yeah.
concept as when people see fitness magazines. I actually just made a post about this like yesterday. Like when people find a fitness magazine, they go, oh, I want to look like that. I look through the magazine, and the magazine, first off, the people in the magazines don't look like the people in the magazines because that's
Oh no,
Photoshop.
they don't.
But then
Yeah.
the second thing is they look at it and be like, oh, this person who's already a pro does this workouts, takes this supplement stack. First off, the supplement stack doesn't really work if they're just being paid to promote it. So they have to tell you they take it so that you take it. Secondly, the workouts they're doing right now are as a pro. What you should be
Yeah.
doing is thinking of what they might have been doing to get to become a pro,
Yeah.
not right now, not the extreme you see in front of you.
Or people following competitors. Another big yes.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
could go on and on
Oh
and on
yeah.
about this, right?
Oh my god. Yeah. Cool. But yeah, I want to be respectful of your time. Where can people find you?
So on Instagram, Dala Loves Dumbbells. My first name is spelled Dala. And then all of my offers and all the fun things that we do are at our website, which is dldnation.com.
Hell yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I learned a ton. I had a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you
I
for
love just
having
hanging
me.
out.
This was so fun. I'm excited. I guess we're going to be doing a certification together too in like a month.
Hey,
So that'll be fun.
we probably won't do the June one because we're getting married in June and we just
Oh, that's right. That's right.
financial things. We probably won't be able to do that. We'll
When
probably
are
hop
you
on the
getting
next one then.
married in June?
Pardon me?
When are you getting married in June?
June 30th, which is hilarious to me because so my mom passed away in 2010, and
I'm
so
sorry.
uh, it, it is what it is. I had a 1 in 365 chance of picking the same day my parents got married, and we got it.
Wow.
I haven't thought about it in 12 years, so it
That's
wasn't something that was top
crazy.
of mind. We're just like, I proposed in August, and then I was like, then she's like, well, we don't want to have a long engagement. Like, what's
Yeah.
something that makes sense? We're like, how about June? And she's like, fantastic. Let's see, we got this going on, we got this going on. Let's do it before June 30th. And I was like, fantastic. And then I called my dad, and he just started bawling.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's so
so
sweet. Well, I
so
love that. I'm super happy for you
oh,
guys. It's
thank you.
exciting.
Thank you. Oh yeah, well, perfect. I'll let you go and get on with your day. I'm sure you got lots of stuff going on. So
Right back at you. I'm sure you do too. But yeah, this was so fun. Thank you so much for having me.
yeah, no worries. Have yourself a wonderful
Bye.
day. Take care.